Hey everyone, welcome to Confabulous 2021. With me in the panel we're on right now is how did you get your gaming fix during the pandemic? With me is Don Kaiser, the chair of Confabulous and Galaxicon when we have it in the Twin Cities, and Nursing Nixatar, a local game. What's that?
Nikaktar.
It's fine.
Nikaktar. Apologies, my apologies. A local game designer, and avid game player. Yeah, I did
and podcaster.
And podcaster. I'm Jason Tucker, who I've helped run Galaxicon and Confabulous. And what we're going to talk about right now is how we managed to keep gaming at a time where it wasn't really safe to gather for games. So why don't I'm gonna pass it to you, Don, first to talk about that.
One quick thing: if you have any questions or comments for the panel, please go ahead and type them in the YouTube chat, and we'll pass them on to the panelists. Mostly, this last year, I switched. Of course, I learned how to use Fantasy Grounds, VTT, for a lot of my role-playing gaming. I'm involved with 4 games right now on a regular basis. My Wednesday game, which I'm just a player in, is a hybrid game. We're mostly back in person again, but we do have 1 or 2 people who also do join us remotely. My Tecmo game on Sunday nights, again, that's always been kind of a virtual game, but now with Fantasy Grounds, it's a little easier. So we have people from California, and I'm going to have another friend joining that game from Wisconsin, and other people remotely locally. And then I have a game with my family, my nephews and nieces, which are all in Illinois. So I run that one completely remotely. And then I have another game with some of my coworkers and their kids. And that's, even though we're in person, we still use Fantasy Grounds because people kind of like it for the maps and the playability and things like that. So
how do you do that? How do you handle that in person and using? Do you just have it up on a screen that everyone shares, or people put in their
iPads? I have it on my computer because, of course, what the DM sees is different. And then, yes, everybody else is on one big giant screen, and they pass around a remote, wireless mouse. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Nursey, what about you?
One of the things that I think happened really early on for me and a lot of people in the pandemic is our increasing reliance on using digital platforms. So there's basically 3 ways that I saw people around me handle gaming during the pandemic. And way number 1 was that people really kind of doubled down on their gaming buddies and made their gaming pods, kind of like you had your social pods. And they really focused on them. And in particular, that worked really well for people who are in campaign games. Because now you have this, you have your captive audience, and they're not going to ditch you for somebody else. So I saw a lot of people go through campaign games, role-playing games, or just board games, a lot of campaign in their pods. 2 was people relying on digital platforms. And I saw that kind of happening in 3 ways. 1 is through official digital adaptations of games that were for sale, like a lot of the stuff you will see on mobile devices and Steam, or through digital platforms that had implementations of games. Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, Board Game Arena, and Yucata were particularly the ones for that, which really, we can talk about this later, lend themselves to certain kinds of games. Or 3, just kind of unofficial mods that mainly people use in Tabletop Simulator. So just doing them online and trying to approximate that board game feel online. And the 3rd, I actually saw a pretty reasonable rise of solo gaming, and actually a number of game publishers either during this time made an effort to, or as for old games, or in developing new games, really specifically tried to make sure that there are solo modes. I think solo modes have become a lot more common in games over the past couple of years in particular. And for example, a couple of the games that were already out had like free or cheap online solo variants that got put on. So which I was a big fan of. So I did a lot of that.
Can you give us some examples of those?
Of the solo ones?
Yeah.
So you actually see a lot of games now come with solo modes as a selling point. It used to not be a selling point. And so people would really not like say much about it. But now it actually, is very prominently displayed on like a ton of games that like now it includes an actual like solo mode. And there's sort of an increasing rise in having solo versions. So for example, a good example of that is the game that came out last year was the Lost Ruins of Arnak, which most European games generally are designed for 2 to 4 players. That's kind of the size of groups that a lot of the European players have. And solo gaming is not a big deal in Europe. But Lost Ruins of Arnak had a solo mode, and then you saw the publisher actually fairly soon after that have an app implementation and then a solo only campaign. So there's like a storyline with printed home components to only like run through this campaign that you can only do in solo as like this whole separate thing, which is again really generally rare and really fairly rare in straight up Euro games. Another good example of that is a German publisher, Hans im Glück, set out just put online early days of the pandemic. Hey y'all, here are some solo versions of our games that you can print at home. And so like, for example, Hadara, which is a very standard Euro 2 to 4 player game, they just added in a solo mode. And if you look at a lot of Kickstarter campaigns now, they will advertise that they have a solo mode, like straight up as a selling point. So.
Nice. We just got a comment from Amber. Shout out to Tabletop Simulator. My family and I use that a lot. So I have not used Tabletop Simulator. I do have a regular group that meets over Zoom on Tuesdays, and we play on Board Game Arena. And we try some of the newer implementations on there, but we generally go back to the same games over and over. We have ongoing games of Seven Wonders and Seven Wonders Duel, and as soon as one ends, we just start up a new one. And so I mean that's one of the things that I think has been happening for me, is that I'm constantly gaming now, because someone takes a turn and then it just sits there and waits for you to take your turn and such. And then when we get together on Tuesday nights, we'll actually finish off some of them. We've been playing Agricola, and I swear I thought I had played Agricola in person on the tabletop, but either the simulator is completely different or I never actually played Agricola because it's so very different from what I remembered. Yeah, that's, and then I have been doing, I've been part of a Starfinder campaign for the past, going on 2 years now. And it actually started pre-pandemic, I want to say, because it was not just local people. It was some people who were in other parts of the country and were using Roll20 for that.
I think an interesting thing about Board Game Arena, not surprisingly, it's a European platform. And so it skews heavily to almost exclusively towards Euro games, because I think work well in that platform. And so you're not going to, I think one of the advantages to Board Game Arena is that it does all of the math and stuff for you. So you can play through Seven Wonders in like under 10 minutes, which is sort of unheard of in the physical version. But it's really, really Euro heavy to the exclusion really of other things. And some of the games, because of how much it does for you, won't even work. One of the clunky things about Tabletop Simulator is that it's just a sandbox physics simulator with a little bit of programming, well, with a variable amount of programming in it. But the plus side is because it allows users to upload their own versions into the workshop. It will have almost everything. So if you can deal with the fact that you have to do most of it manually. If you want to play like an American game, chances are you're going to have to go to Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator to pull that off.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia. That's the other one you mentioned. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're both physics-based engines. So what they do is they basically will create component. The most one like this is Tabletopia. It's just basically it's got cards and bits, and you can upload models and stuff, but it's just there. It doesn't manage anything for you. It doesn't make sure you're not making mistakes. This is if you just threw all the components in front of you on an actual table and was like, go learn. Tabletopia, however, requires that anything get approved and implemented. So everything is official to make sure it works. Tabletop Simulator lets people do the same thing, but you can actually do some programming a little bit. So while it won't manage the rules for you, it'll do like a lot of upkeep and setup if someone has bothered to program it, but it's kind of open to everybody, which means that there are a ton of people who have taken the time to like scan every card of Arkham Horror and just put it in there and make it happen. And so that one really, there are official versions as well that you can pay for, but most people I know just use the user mods because once you buy Tabletop Simulator, the user mods are free. And one thing you can say about us gamers, we're very obsessive people. So like, you know that if a game is popular enough, someone's just going to have put in all the effort to make it just look exactly right. And so it's the one that has the upfront cost, but and it's really, and because it's none of it's like a lot of the stuff in the workshop is not official. It can be buggy, and you have to like quick save every 5 seconds to make sure that the game doesn't like blow up and make you lose everything you've done.
Oh my
goodness! On the
goodness!
other side, it's just got everything. Basically.
But Tabletopia is also that's the one that's in Steam. Is that correct, you're saying?
Tabletopia, actually, one of the advantages of Tabletopia and the browser-based ones like Board Game Arena and Yucata is that you can actually play them on mobile devices as well. So Tabletop Simulator is only available on a computer, but Tabletopia you can play it like on a tablet as well. But it is available on Steam. Yep.
One of the problems I've noticed with Board Game Arena, no matter what platform it's on, is that the play space area, I have trouble enlarging it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all of the other stuff, like if you zoom your screen, all the other stuff will zoom in, but the actual playing area won't. Which I'm like, okay, that's not helping at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does not have a scalable display. And actually, if you're playing on too small of a screen, it might not fit the board. So you're like scrolling around.
Yep. It's when you mentioned mobile devices that immediately jumped to mind. It's like, okay, or Board Game Arena on your phone is just sometimes not the best.
But it does let you do playing over days where it just emails everybody when it's their turn. And I tried that. I tried that with a game of, I think, Teotihuacan. And it would like constantly be my turn when I'd be at the gym or something. I was like, I'll log in. I have no idea. I was like, I just need to take my turn so no one gets mad at me and I can't see what I'm doing. One of the other things that I think is really tricky about the browser heavily scripted games like Board Game Arena and Yucata are that they're not great for learning a game because like when you do something, the game will do all the scoring and the calculations and the bonuses and the costs, and it happens in a fraction of a second. And if you're learning a game, you're like, what just happened? What did I do? So they're great for like a game like Seven Wonders, for example. It's great if you know Seven Wonders and you can just pound through it. But if you don't, you're like, what? I don't know what everyone just did. And it can be really confusing. And so they're not, I don't think they're great platforms for learning a game, which can be tricky.
Yeah, and with Agricola in particular, where it's not where you get a notification that it's your turn. If it's been a little while, you're like, okay, what was I doing? Mm-hmm. I need to actually leave myself notes to say, when it comes around to your turn in several hours, here's what you're supposed to do next.
Agricola is interesting in that because it also has a full just digital adaptation to make it like a video game. And so the action spaces, they made like cutesy buildings that are part of the village that you can go visit. And I'd played Agricola a bunch, and I like pulled that up and like I can't tell what is actually interface and what is like, oh, there's a sheep just walking across the screen. And it was really confusing. I think that's actually one of the more like that's one where you really probably want to play it on something not official like Board Game Arena, because the official implementation was
Oh,
really,
really?
really
Oh,
hard to
yeah.
set
I
up.
was gonna say I haven't seen that because I've been playing it on Board Game Arena.
Yeah,
So,
I wouldn't unless it's
Okay.
on sale.
I mean,
So
it
one of the
sounds
things,
cute. It definitely sounds cute.
It's
one
cute.
of the things that Nercy, you were talking about pods, right? And so starting, for me, starting in June, I've gotten my pod, and people who I know have been fully vaccinated and so forth, and we have gotten together in person a few times, just for a game night, with just a small group. I used to, for those who friends of mine, both of you, I used to have big game nights where there were 20, 30 people, and that's a thing of the past at this point, and I don't know when that will ever start up again. But I've had a few pods where I've had 8 or 10 people over, and just people who I know have been fully vaccinated. So I'm just kind of rolling that ball down the hill a little bit, but I'm very careful about who I invite and things like that. So.
And the other thing I've actually, so I'm a sleever because I'm like, I'm going to pay $5 to protect $100 game. But I've really, really been very cautious about like making sure things are sleeved, because everyone, appropriately is using hand sanitizer. And boy, let me tell you, if they've got any isopropyl alcohol on their hands and they're grabbing parts of your game, that is going to mess it up quickly. So yeah, like the PPE for my board games has gotten particularly intense over the past couple of years. And it was already pretty intense, if anyone has actually ever seen.
It looks like we have a couple of comments.
Yeah, I was just about to copy them over, but go ahead. Yeah.
Let's see. From Amber, I agree. My family switched between Tabletop Simulator and the official Talisman digital game on Steam. Pros and cons with both. And Talisman is my fam's favorite game. But I would say that with the digital game, when we tried to add in extra expansions we hadn't played before, we did still have to stop sometimes to figure out what happened because there was a game mechanic we weren't familiar with. Yeah, I've noticed that, with Steam as well, where, yeah, it you click once and then it goes. She continues, that said, on Tabletop Simulator, it's very manual, which would sometimes draw out the game really long. And I mean, that's Talisman. It's already really long.
Well, but it is true though. Like the physics-based ones let you do a lot more, and I think they translate well into if you're ever to play it in person. Like if you had just played Agricola on Board Game Arena and you had it in like the physical version, you might be like, I'm not really sure what to do because this doesn't look familiar. Whereas Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia are really good in that they're simulating that. But boy, there were enough for a while. I was going through the Arkham Horror card game campaign on Tabletop Simulator, and yeah, it was like picking up a card should not take me this long. Putting it in my hand should not be taking me like 20 seconds. And some of that like manual stuff, it's not even like it actually prolongs the game because the interface of doing that was kind of was not great. And then because it's physics based, if you occasionally get a bug, I think I was trying to teach someone Scythe, and I was like trying to show him a card and I accidentally flicked it and it skidded across the board and it took all the pieces with it. And like,
this is digital.
Yeah, but it's a physics-based objects. It's not exactly a board game implementation. So
okay.
A question for panelists and also our friends out there in the ether. Amber, you said that you were playing with your family. Were a lot of them here locally, or were they scattered? I mean, Jason, you said you played with a bunch of people that were not local. What about that? How has it been using these digital platforms playing with non-local people?
Well, for our Tuesday night board game arena night over Zoom, it is people who are all local, although they several of them live in almost exurbs at this point. So we definitely were not getting together every Tuesday night to play board games prior to this. So, you know, even like if we did get together to play board games, it was maybe once a month, if that. And now it's just easy. It's like, okay, it's Tuesday night. I'm at home. Just going to log into Zoom and play for a couple hours. And then for Roll20, for the Starfinder campaign, that one of the DM at the start was James, who is running some games this weekend, and he's local to the Twin Cities, and a couple of his roommates and coworkers who are also local have participated. But one friend of ours is in Montana or Idaho. I don't know where she is right now. She's out west, and the other one is in Portland. And you know, we started pre-pandemic, and we had to do it on Roll20 because of the fact that two of the people were not in the Twin Cities.
You know,
Amber, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jess. No, go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, Amber. To back up a little bit, she says other games they were playing Betrayal at House on the Hill quite a bit as well. But she says, for my most of my family is in Minnesota in different cities, but I have a sister in California. It was really a nice way for us to connect while we couldn't be together. And we also didn't do games weekly, but we did do a full game day, literally 12 to 15 hours or so every other month or so. So yeah, it definitely makes it easier to play more regularly, I'd say.
You know, and as I mentioned, you know, one of my gaming groups is my nephew and my grandnephews, and they're in Illinois and some of their friends and in Michigan, and we started this pre-pandemic, you know, obviously, you know, it was one of those. I happened to be, this is again pre-pandemic. I happened to be visiting at Christmas, and my grandnephew said, you know, he started to play D&D, and I, you know, I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, at a local library, and it was clear that the person running at the local library didn't really know what they were doing all that much. You know how that goes. You know, and I said, well, you know, I've been running D&D for, you know, 40 some odd years. You know, would you like me to run a game? Because now that we, you know, we have these digital platforms. Again, I use Fantasy Grounds, but as you mentioned, Roll20 is another one, and the Foundry is another one. Three very fine digital platforms, VTT platforms, virtual tabletop role-playing game platforms. And you know, I said, you know, I told him, well, you know, would you like me to run a game for you? Which, you know, we wouldn't have been able to do prior to this. And so, you know, it has allowed me to, you know, run role-playing games for, you know, people, you know, because even my Tecmo game, even though that's been going on for years and years and years, prior to the VTTs, you know, we just had Jeff from California up on a screen, you know, rolling his dice remotely, you know, and we weren't, you know, but now that we're using a tabletop, we can all join in on that, and we use Discord then for our voice channel, you know. Yep. So, you know, it works out really. These things work out really well.
I think one of the things that's also been interesting is that this shift has normalized digital playing. So a lot of people viewed it as how can I still play with my friends now that I can't see them? But I think one interesting effect is that people have actually sought out friends who aren't local. Like, you know, I have a friend who, some friends who live in St. Louis, and the only time I ever played with them was when I happened to be in St. Louis for work, and we played. But like now that it was normal to play online, they were like, well, why can't we extend our game nights to people? So like I would sort of been part of that. So I think it's been good. You know, we looked a lot about how the social restrictions have restricted and in some cases severed some connections. But I think the idea that we normalize that we can actually interact with people online, there's actually been a good opportunity for people to actually form or strengthen connections that they kind of didn't before, because they're like, what do you mean I can't play a board game with you? You're hours away. And now it's fine and it's normal. So let's just do it.
Yeah, I agree. And not just board games. I've been participating in the DC area Lambda Sci-Fi Book Club, and these are people that I saw once a year at a convention here and there, but now I get together with them every month, and who knows what'll happen once things kind of get back to the way they were before. But I think in a lot of cases, we'll probably continue to do the Zoom and
I think that at least again on the book club thing, we'll continue to do a hybrid model for sure. There's no reason not to. Even if a lot of us in the same room, we'll set up a computer screen and do a hybrid model, and Zoom in for those who can't or don't want to be in the same room. I think that will continue going forward. Again, that same thing like I say with my D&D groups, with my other groups, where I have a hybrid model on my techno group and on my Wednesday group, so.
Have any of you been to one of the big things that I know people were missing, and I know that people have started attending them again, is gaming conventions. Gamehole Con just happened in Madison. I know that what's the local one? Not Confabulous.
You mean
Con of the North?
Con of the North. Con of the North is
that one's coming up, and there's also was it 2Game or whatever Game 2. Anyway, yes, Gamehole.
Gen Con happened, I think.
Gen Con happened. Dragon Con happened.
Did Nursey, did you go to Gamehole?
I have not gone to any cons. I'm going to a mega con this coming weekend, in a week. I was originally going to go to Gen Con, but the person for whom I work there decided not to go. They had to make their decisions while and this has been hard, right? Because the cons have so much lead time. They have to sort of make decisions without really knowing what the state of the pandemic is going to be, and sort of people have to place their bets. And reasonably, she was concerned that things were not going in the right direction. And this was sort of during the spring surge, and this kind of happened during the Delta surge. So I think it was a reasonable thought. So yeah, so I have not. And I don't know. I think there's this part of me that just would have felt weird going in the middle of the surge. So I'm okay having not, even though this is the first time I'd missed Gen Con in many years, and it's probably my favorite convention to go to.
I mean, we totally understand, because we were planning on Confabulous being in person, and then we decided to pivot because of the surge. So it's completely understandable. I did have a friend,
because you had to make that decision, months ahead of time. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I have a friend who actually did go out to Gamehole, and he said it was good. It was probably not as big as it's been in the past, but that the parking lot at the location was full. He said that he wasn't a good judge of the size, but everyone wore masks. There was no problem with people wearing masks at all. I think that they were asking for people to be vaccinated, but I don't know if they were requiring proof, or I think it was either vaccination or a
test.
A clear test. Yeah. And he said that the biggest problem was being able to hear what people were saying through the masks, that was the most difficult part. But beyond that, it went really well. I haven't heard anyone talk about how Gen Con went. So I assume that they're in Indianapolis, right?
No,
Gen
sorry,
Con
yes.
is in Indianapolis. And
Yes,
that was
yes,
part
yes.
of, I think the tricky thing was their messaging was largely, well, we'll have to see what happens and we'll follow whatever Indianapolis and the state of Indiana say. And like, apologies to anyone from Indiana. I do not consider Indianapolis to be a leader in public health policy.
What?
Yeah. So, it's understandable to be skittish. I think mask mandates, OmegaCon, I mean, OmegaCon's a very small con, but like they're requiring proof of vaccination. I am okay with, like, I'm great with that. It still sort of makes me feel weird to be around people, but I think that's okay to do. And hey, for a
Yeah,
few
it is.
people,
I mean,
easier to hear. Hopefully.
yeah.
And
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, kind of the North. I'm going to be doing some things there, but I'm probably just going to be doing, because kind of the North is doing a hybrid model. So they're doing, both online and in person. So I'm probably going to be doing, the online stuff from my kind of the North stuff. But
I mean, I gotta say this though, there for board and tabletop gaming, part of the allure is that there is a physical medium with which you're interacting, right? Like I like games that have nice bits and little minis and things like little maps that you can move around. Because after a while, part of me thinks, well, why don't I just play a video game and like call it quits? And so, the using the online platform is a necessary part of it right now. But there is a certain aspect of the physicality of board games, which is what's I think made them endurable, even in a highly digital age right now. People just kind of like having things in their hands. People are very tactile. And that's actually largely why I will still just pull out a lot of games and put them on my table and play them by myself, because I'm like, I just still want this physical thing. I don't want to play it all online.
Amber was saying in the chat here about her family. A lot of them in Minnesota, but they do get together weekly, and they hadn't been doing digital games pre-pandemic, but they didn't know it was a possibility. But they've been using this a lot now, and they're planning on continuing to do it because they're scattered a little bit, and that, as Nursey said, when you have friends and family that are scattered, this has given people an opportunity to keep connections through gaming, which is really nice.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, Nursey, what's the last game that you took out and played solo on your table?
There's one actually mid-game on my table right now, and that is Unsettled from Orange Nebula. And yesterday was Clash of Cultures, the Monumental Edition. I don't know, part of it is I just sort of like having it, and I think part of it is I just still want to make videos about games. And so, for better or worse, that has made me still pull them out, still sort of do them physically, so I can play them and take photos of them and so forth. So playing them physically and playing them often even by myself is still sort of part of my day-to-day or weekly thing.
Nice.
I even played Twilight Imperium by myself last winter.
I think I just want to put a plug in for my friend Nercy. Because he's such an excellent teacher of games. And no, seriously, you're the best teacher of games that I know, my friend.
Thanks.
And it's all for me, having him in person helping us learn a game is just freaking amazing.
Well, why don't you talk about your podcast a little bit?
I was actually sure. So it's a YouTube channel for Nursey Games right there. Shameless plug. Yeah, I just because I loved teaching and talking about games about 3 years ago, I decided that a couple friends had been saying, why don't you just do videos about them? And I thought, it's a lot of work. There's so many people, blah, blah, blah. But part of what I do as part of my day job is to teach people how to communicate very succinctly. And it's one of the skills that we have to try to teach. And so I thought, you know what, I will just, what if and I also don't have the attention span for videos, right? I'm one of those people who will just scrub to the end, like, what is the point of this? And so the idea behind it, which I think has worked pretty well, is that I'll just do everything that I think someone needs to know about a game in 3 minutes. So beginning to end, exactly 3 minutes. I have it sort of like down to, because one of the things I've been doing in YouTube now is like doing my timestamps, and I was like, man, these are like timed always like the same amount of time. And so it's exactly 3 minutes long. I figure people probably have that kind of attention span, and I can get through the points. And one of the things that I really just wanted to do is to be able to provide information, like critical information about games, for people to think about them without like actually just giving a straight up like, this game's awesome or this game's awful, because that's like you pull out a game and you're like, this is my favorite game, and someone's like, oh, I hate that game. And so like, what are you supposed to do? You can try to look at reviewers and hopefully eventually find one who has very similar tastes to you, or just take it on blind faith. But I didn't think that was great. So I tried to take more of an approach. It's like, these are some things that work well. These are some potential pitfalls which may not bother you, or they may really bother you. So you sort of take that into account and figure out and make your own balance about what you want out of it. And that drove a lot of people crazy at first, because they're like, I just need you to tell me if you like the game or not. I'm like, I'm not going to, because my opinion is not the answer. I'm trying to give you information. If you want someone to just give you an opinion, there are other places to do it. I'm the way my brain works is I will give you data and let you process it. And it's been nice. I've been trying. It's a very small operation, but I've gotten some people who really said that they appreciate the format. One of the things I also do at the end of every year is I have my 10 best games in 3 minutes from the previous year. And so one of the things I did for 2020 is I highlighted every game that had a solo mode, because I figured people are going to be playing probably by themselves like I am. So let's actually give attention to people who do have solo modes for playing during the pandemic. Because there was actually a lot of them, which was nice. So anyway, I try to get a new video out I'm actually processing one in the background right now, so there'll be one within the hour. Anyway, so it's just something that I do. I don't get paid by anyone. I don't get sponsorship by anyone, and that's sort of intentional because it sort of makes it a smaller project, but I just want people to know that I'm really just I want people to sort of be happy, and I'm not doing things. I'm not doing things to try to make myself popular, which has never been in my experience. And I'm trying not to be one of those people who's like, this game is so amazing, to just try to sell it. And I actually have gotten flack from a couple of people being like, why did you say my game was not great? I'm like, oh, because that anything is great, and it legit has problems. And now I don't owe you anything, because you didn't pay me to do this. So there's that.
Or even give me a copy of the game. Yes.
Yeah, it's actually really rare that someone actually will give me a copy, and I generally don't solicit it, because I feel like that creates weird ethical issues with reciprocity. Whatever. Not going to get into that. I did actually get offered a sponsorship, and I turned it down, and my sister said I was crazy, and I was like, no, that just seems weird to me. So anyway, if you want to check it out, youtube.com/NercyGames.
Nice.
Nancy, if you put it in the chat, we'll make sure that we put it in the YouTube chat, and Jason will put it on our Facebook.
Absolutely.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
And at 3 minutes per episode, I won't even have to increase the speed up to 1.5x.
Yeah, that's actually how I normally like. I also talk really fast, so so people will be like, "Wow, how much did you speed up the video?" I'm like, "Nope, that is actually how fast I talk." And so when I actually give lectures, one of my students was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to watch it at 1.5 speed." I'm like, I wouldn't recommend starting with that. Just
You got to work up to that. You
just
got to
kind of.
work up to that.
I will say I was one of the events I actually did go to was Fantasy Flight has their Arkham Knights most years, and they didn't do it last year, but they did it this year. So that was my first foray into a game event actually during the pandemic, and I really wanted to. Their spotlight game was Unfathomable, and there's certain games I can't really review unless I have a good crowd. Like that is a minimum of 3 players. It's a hidden information bluffing game. I need to go through it with several people to kind of really get the sense of it. So it's like, I'll go to this so I can get the review posted on that. And there are 4 tables, and I don't know why they had reduced staff, but they did. And so there's one person in charge of teaching 4 tables. Luckily, I had actually already gone through it once. And so like the person who's teaching, she just kept walking around and saying, "Why don't y'all pick your characters? I'll be back in 5 minutes." And I was like, And I said to them, "Hey everyone, I've played this once before. I'm not going to promise to be perfect. But let me just teach it to you." Which is fun because I actually really enjoy teaching games and I haven't gotten to do that in a while. And then as I was in the midst of teaching, she came by and I was just talking and explaining how the monsters worked. And she said, "Hey, are you a school teacher?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I teach at a school." So yes, like, "Yeah, you teach games like a school teacher." I'm like, "I don't know what that means." apparently, Dawn, I project teacherness.
Okay.
When I'm like, which is also part of why I love Gen Con, because I just love like telling people about games and teaching people about games and not like worry about like selling them. I'm just like, I just want to show you stuff. Sorry.
Has there been any highlights of new games for either of you in the last 12 months or so? Things that you've tried that you hadn't tried before that you like?
Not real. Well, I was actually at my brother's place, and his son is a big fan of the I don't know what you would call this type of game, but I had never played before. And the one specifically that we played were Unlock. So they're, I guess, essentially escape room type games where you have to figure out clues to progress. And so I had never played any of those before. I bought a couple of them for him for his birthday, and we played through those, and they were a lot of fun. And he gave me some of his old ones that he had already played through to take home, and I haven't actually played through them. They're nice solo games if you're smart enough to figure them out by yourself.
Well, Nancy gave me a copy of the new Dune game for my birthday, and played through that. That was a very enjoyable game. I would definitely do that again. It was still figuring out the mechanics, but I came in third out of fourth. I didn't actually completely lose.
To be clear, we're talking about Dune Imperium, not
Okay.
the reworking of the old Dune game, but Dune Imperium. Yeah.
A lot of the artwork from the movie.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because around this time every year I was like, "Oh, what is going to be on my top 10 of 2021 list?" So I'm actually like looking through my list as you're asking me this. The video I'm actually posting in a bit is the new version of The Crew. I don't know if you've heard of The Crew, played The Crew. It's a cooperative trick-taking game, and like the mechanics are stupid. It's like one of those games where like the mechanics are just stupid easy, and they work so well. You're like, I cannot believe I didn't think of this already. But it's great, and so the new one actually has a lot of mechanics. It's just the game also is like 5 minutes long per hand. And it's cooperative, and so it's been a really good game. It's small. I've been able to sort of carry it around with me. You can play it on Board Game Arena. So the new version, I think, makes a lot of really cool changes to it. Gosh, what else? I'm on the spot. I'm really bad at thinking of things. Destinies I thought was great. I played that solo to get my role-playing game fix. I really, even though it's a couple years old, I finally started working through the Tainted Grail campaign, and I think that game is just really, really solid and really just sort of fascinating to go through.
What game was that?
Tainted Grail.
Tainted Grail. Okay.
Tainted Grail is sort of it's a cooperative sort of campaign adventure that kind of tries to do what a lot of as a branching storyline. So it's trying to be like a computer role-playing game in a way. Has a really interesting mechanic where you chain your cards together in combat, or an alternative combat is diplomacy, which is pretty unique. One game I also really thought was really well done is Dice Throne was like a pretty good dueling game, but they actually made it into a cooperative dungeon crawl. And it's an expansion, but it basically just redoes the whole game and uses the base game's components as just components. And I thought that was really clever. I feel like I'm saying a lot of dungeon crawls. I just mentioned 3 in a row. I like dungeon crawls. Turns out. So
I've seen ads for a licensed version of Dice Throne for Marvel.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's next. It's on Kickstarter. Yep.
Yeah. I got my copy of. I speaking of Kickstarter, I kickstarted because I'm a big fan of ancient history, the Egyptian period and the Roman period and things like that. So I just got my big huge box of a game called Ankh. And Nercy, thank you for coming by and helping me play my copy of the game. But that's CMOS, and what did you say it stands for? What does that stand for?
Cool Mini or Not games, CMON.
CMON, okay.
Cool Mini or Not.
Yeah, it has many miniatures in it, and it is a worker placement slash
area control
game.
The sort of weird colloquial name for that mechanic is dudes on a map. We should probably say figures on a map, not dudes, but yes, dudes on a map. It is in that Eric Lang line of dudes on a map games. So like that he had with Rising Sun and with blanking on it.
The Viking one. Yeah, the Viking one. Yeah.
Anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. Yeah. So
but this is
Blood Rage.
Yeah. It's somewhat based upon the historically in the Middle Kingdom, Akhenaten, who was Tutankhamun's father, decided that there would be one god, monotheistic, Aten, god of the sun, rather than all the gods. And so the game is basically about the gods fighting it out who's going to be the one sole god.
Interesting.
So it's got you got your monuments and your gods who are wandering around the board and their soldiers, and yeah, it's kind of an interesting game.
You mentioned going to Fantasy Flight once. I know one of the things that, aside from going to people's homes, a lot of the local gaming stores host gaming nights. The Source, they're well known for it. I've gone a couple of times to Rockhopper Games, which is new. And in fact, I was just there on Tuesday for a little bit for HeroClix night. And it's been a long time since I had played HeroClix, but it was fun. It was fun. There was the owner, Mikey, and I played a little bit, and then there was one other table of 2 people that were there. So it was kind of quiet, but we are still in the pandemic, and it's still kind of they're still recently open, so they're still kind of building up their nights. And I know that they're going to be doing an X-Wing night, and they have a GLBT board gaming day coming up a week from Sunday, I think. So, and then I haven't been to the source in, gosh, I don't know how long.
I mean, I'm hoping this like idea of having these communal spaces where you can play games, it feels like some of it hasn't held on, some of it has, and I think it's just nice to be able. I've met friends through going through these things, and let's face it, there's some people with whom I want to play games, but like I don't really want to invite them over. So it's nice to have that option as well. I appreciate the methods that they're going through to try to make it work better, like the reservation system, for example, reservation and time limits. So that some random person doesn't come to your table, you know that it'll just be the people you choose, and you'll know you'll have it for this long. I think are reasonable accommodations that I think have actually largely worked pretty well.
Yeah, I know that that was definitely what you had to do, I think, for most of the stuff at Gamehole, according to my friend, is you had to, at least for a lot of the RPGs, of course, which is, you know, we do for Confabulous. Yeah, I agree that it's definitely a great way to go and try out new games and stuff by going to the store where they're actually demoing them and stuff, rather than, because games are not cheap.
No, these days, you know, it's people who are not fanatic gamers, like the people who are on this panel. You know, you know, my friends, my coworkers, you know, and their kids that I'm running a D&D game for, and I talk about, you know, oh, you know, I just dropped, you know, $150 on a game and 2 expansions, and their eyes just go, what? You know, I mean, oh yeah, you know, you know,
This ain't Parker Brothers.
Well,
yeah.
the thing I try to explain to people who don't get it is that games are a form of art, and sometimes they're not. Basically, like all versions of Monopoly are not art, but but like a lot of them are, right? People are like the game designers are artists in a way, musicians and writers and actors and so forth are, and especially now because of their popularity, there's so much attention paid to the quality of games and the art that goes into them and so forth. Like people think like, why are you buying a toy for $100? But like you're actually like supporting an artist's work, or in many cases many artists' work. So I think if you sort of view it as like this is sort of an interactive piece of art, I found that helps people, I think, understand it better. Like, why are you paying $20 to go into a dark room and watch a light being projected against the wall for a couple hours? That's not right. You're going for the experience of what people are projecting. Same kind of thing.
And the other thing is, you know, you mentioned earlier, Nercy, is that there is also the look and feel of it. I mean, there's you actually have a physical something. You know, you have miniatures, you have meeples, you have cards, you have a board, a game board. You know, depending on the game, sometimes you have a neoprene game board. You know, so yeah, that there's more to it, you know, and as you say, Nercy, these days, you know, people look at the quality of games, and you know, and they say, uh, um, you know, the thickness of the components, right? You know, of the cardboard, or the thickness of the cards, or the gloss on the cards, and the game. I mean, people look at that, you know, and if it's cheap, the game quickly gets a reputation for having cheap components.
And those are the stretch goals on Kickstarter, is improving the components.
And like board game artists are actually like known and a selling point, right? Like people will advertise this game has art by Beth Sobel or Vincent Dutré or the Miho or whoever. And that was not a thing because the art was not a big deal. But now that is so integral to it that like it actually, the fact that you have an established amazing artist like Ian O'Toole, anything that had Ian O'Toole like designed sometimes, like the fact that Ian O'Toole did the art overshadows who actually designed the game. You're like, look at that Ian O'Toole design or art and design for that game. And it's I think that it's really sort of become that people really recognize this as a collaborative art piece. And so, and Amber, I'm glad that you like thinking of games as an interactive piece of art as well.
On that note, we have only a few minutes left. I want to remind everyone that at 4:30, Don will be hosting a panel called What's Queer and Good in New TV Series, talking about Picard, Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, Foundation, etc. And then at 7, Don will be hosting a panel called Ask a DM Level Up Time, where several DMs will be answering your questions and talking about how to improve your role-playing game. Then at 8:30, I will be hosting a panel called An Expanded Universe After All, which is talking about Star Wars and all the different new media involved in Star Wars. We on the gaming side, I'm not sure if John still has openings at 8 tonight for Thirsty Sword Lesbians RPG. But if so, get on Discord and talk about, or find out if you can still get on that. And tomorrow, James is going to be running Morkborg, and then John will be running Everway Silver Anniversary Edition, The Quest for the Queer Sphere. So, and we also have people who are running games on Board Game Arena in the Discord chat. So go ahead and join on there. And find us on Facebook. You can sign up for the Galaxians mailing list to find out about book clubs and other events. And any last comments from Don or Nursey?
Just again, it's been really good having these digital platforms again, just for role playing games. The fact that I'm able to run games for friends and family, and as Amber said too, who are at a distance. It has been a lot of fun.
I just keep encouraging people to find ways to do the things that you love.
And definitely check out Nursey Games on YouTube. We'll post the links in various places. Thank you both for your time today. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.